Save the Semantics, episode 278. It is October 29th, 2024. My name is Myro. This is the podcast where I ramble on for a bit about some shit. Recording this on a nice, cool fall Tuesday afternoon, slash evening. It really feels like fall is here. I'm wearing my coat and everything. It's nice and chilly in a good way. So which I take it to be a good thing. I think. So I just came back from the UK from a trip. Had a really had a lovely time. I'm not gonna do that. I'm not gonna do the accent. I'm not gonna go through with that. No, but I had I just had a really great time, a wonderful time out there, and now I'm back. Now I'm back home in the States. I think every time, even with a small trip, this was sort of a week-long trip, so a bit of a longer trip, but even with a shorter, say it's like a little weekend excursion, which I have maybe once in a while. Even with something like that and coming back, I do get a bit of what I would consider to be sort of a hangover of sorts, right? Kind of like not like an actual hangover, but more so a vacation hangover. Whether it is from maybe jet lag or just the tiredness from travel and that kind of thing. I think all of those kinds of things kind of add up a little bit. So, I've made the mistake of not giving myself kind of breathing room before kind of getting back into the swing of things with my regular work routine and all that. But this time around, I sort of gave, I think I needed sort of like a day to just sort of recover and, unpack, get my things kind of in order and just rest in general. And, I think that was good. I think that's something that I should probably do moving forward whenever I do have a little vacation of sorts, just in general. So it's good to kind of recuperate and just kind of get back into whatever routine that I had before. It was good to kind of have that little break. Yesterday I spent a good chunk of the day just sort of catching up on basketball and that kind of thing. There's a whole slew of games that I was able to, a good amount of them I was able to get into and watch sort of like the final minutes. A lot of them were pretty close games, and I hadn't really been watching too much of kind of the opening week, so I finally was able to, sit down and watch a lot of the games. So I was happy to be able to do that. Interesting, I think with the first week, the opening kind of period, opening first few games of the season for each of the teams, it's always interesting to see kind of where they end up. I think there's always overreactions to certain teams, either overachieving or, significantly underachieving. And it is kind of funny to see some of those narratives, potentially unravel as the year continues. I think some of those concerns do hold some water, and I think it's worth getting into, whether it's the concerns with the Bucks or the Nuggets, right? I think those two teams in particular, there's a lot of glaring issues that kind of stand out. But I think that with some of the better teams in the NBA, it's way too early in general to really draw any conclusions at all. So I would just hold. I think it is fun to speculate whether any of these teams are going to be, potentially in hot water, if they're going to have any issues moving forward. But I do think that it's always good to keep in mind that it's such a small sample size that it's really hard to say, what the final result is going to be, and what their final records are going to show at the end of the season. It's a long season ahead. So it's maybe far too early to really draw any significant conclusions. But again, I think it is sort of fun to think about like what these teams are either doing right or wrong, and maybe overreact a little bit. I think it can be fun to do that. It's been a nice little kind of start to the week so far. Obviously coming back from a trip, I think can be a little, I don't know, you can feel a little out of it at times. I know I definitely felt that way. Just sort of, it's difficult to settle back in a lot of instances, but there's been some nice things, like I mentioned, just being able to catch up back on, basketball, is nice. There's a Warriors game later tonight. I'm going to maybe talk about kind of what their current position is at the moment. Just how they've performed, and, what looks good and what maybe is something to take note of moving forward, and a bit of a preview of this game later tonight. But there's been some good stuff that came out, especially today, and specifically today because I thought it would just be a good time to record something, because the news is like literally right up my alley. So earlier this morning, Nintendo announced that Xenoblade Chronicles X is releasing a definitive edition, which will be coming out on March 20th, 2025. Kind of out of nowhere. I did see there was like a rumor on the Gaming Leaks and Rumors subreddit by some Twitter user, and I don't know who they really are, but it was just like, oh, Xenoblade X is gonna come out with come out on the Switch. I was like, all right, I'm not, I've seen enough of these rumors and these discussions over the years that I'm not taking any of this like seriously at all. And then it actually turned out to be right, and it kind of shocked me. It came out of nowhere. It was kind of like a holy shit moment, because I had sort of dashed my hopes that the Switch version would come out, because I felt like the timing of that, I felt it would have been better suited for maybe something like, a few years ago or something like that, before Xenoblade 3 came out. But I think honestly, just the timing of everything, like I mentioned, like every single year there has been something Xenoblade related. I think this, 2024 has sort of been maybe the outlier in that, but 2025 we have X coming out, and which I'm just like really floored by that. I'm really happy now that we do have essentially every single Xenoblade game on the Switch system. I was honestly, I had hopes earlier on, maybe a couple of years back, that the I guess this sort of remastered definitive edition would be coming to Switch, and I was sort of holding on to that a little bit, and I think that kind of faded away as these last couple of years have kind of continued, as we've sort of sunsetted into the end of the Switch 1 life cycle. And I think part of me was thinking, as was I think many other people were, that it would be released as a potential launch title for the Switch 2, just because I think the enhanced graphics, all of these things, I think would sort of fit well with what the new Switch system would present for just like its graphics and fidelity and whatnot. I think it would have been a nice little showcase for that. So it really kind of was a surprise that they've announced it essentially so late into its life cycle. But I guess maybe the motivation for that, one, I think it's going to be, I do really believe that it's going to be, backwards compatible with the Switch 1, the Switch 2 is. And I think that there is still this this idea, this strategy to sort of continue and prolong the original Switch's life cycle leading into next year, which is when the expected Switch 2 is going to be released, right? The fact that they've announced that this game is going to be coming in March, I think gives some additional indications of when the Switch 2 is going to be announced. I no longer have any hope or just really any I don't think it's going to be announced this month. There was some speculation I saw that it was going to be announced this week, either yesterday or today. That clearly hasn't happened. And I think we're too far late into October for there to be an announcement of that magnitude to be made. And I did see in a video earlier, and they were talking about there were these like former Nintendo employees. They were talking about kind of the motivation for announcing the new console, and I think they made some pretty good points about why they wouldn't announce it at this time frame. And I think all of the points they kind of made a lot of sense. And I think now at this point, they're probably not going to announce it this year. If they're not going to announce it at around the same time that the Switch 1 anniversary, when the original Switch was announced, and it doesn't really fit into that time frame anymore. So I think it sort of makes sense that they're kind of punting it off to next year, and then just kind of coinciding with that with the Xenoblade X remaster definitive edition announcement. I have a feeling that the Switch 2 is probably going to be later, like in 2025, maybe during the summer is when it's going to be released, right? I think that just kind of makes sense, just in terms of expectations and just sort of avoiding certain news cycles and that kind of thing. And just considering that there is still, some games to kind of look forward to, right? Because like we did get past the, Echoes of Wisdom release date, and then also I think the Mario and Luigi release date is that one's coming up in November, as well as Dragon Quest. Mario Party just came out. I think they have kind of their slew of holiday titles. So unless they announce something else, I think those things are probably going to keep them over until the end of the calendar year. And then 2025 is probably when they're going to start to ramp up and even, announce, the system maybe in January or something like that, or February. So I that's just kind of, I think that makes a lot of sense, and I think that kind of falls in line with, what more educated people have to say in regards to a Switch 2 announcement and release and that kind of thing. So I really kind of, this announcement for Xenoblade X has really kind of shifted the goalposts for me. Again, I've already said this many times. I'm not someone who's going to buy the console on release unless like there's like a game that is like, unless like and I as a Xenoblade fan, I am already very, very spoiled, and I'm very grateful for that I essentially have, my favorite series and all of it on one platform. So unless like the new Xenoblade game gets announced alongside as sort of like a launch title, which I don't think is going to be the case, considering that Monolith just announced that they were working on a new project. Unless there is something that is like really gonna get me to buy the system, like not even like a new Mario, or I don't know, new Zelda might get me to get it. But if there's got to be a specific console exclusive that has to kind of catch my attention in order for me to get the console on launch. So I'm not, again, I'm not going to be in that demographic who buys who is like that. But even then, I am sort of excited to see something new, just to kind of be, kind of be a part of the sort of the hype train and everything like that. And I am excited to see kind of what is next. But I do think that this X definitive edition announcement is going to hold me over for quite some time. I have something like I have almost I still have kind of like my backlog / library of games that I still have. I haven't played, I haven't finished Zelda yet. So I still have that to play through. Of course, there's going to be Dragon Quest later this year. I'm interested in picking up Yakuza. There's still so many games that that I will be still kind of holding on to and playing through until the rest of the year. So I'm really not concerned at all about the rest of 2024, and then going into 2025. There are many games that I have to look forward to, and just on top of now having Xenoblade X to looking forward to kind of earlier on in the year in March. So just a lot of great stuff, and I think it is really impressive what Nintendo has kind of been able to do with Switch, the original Switch, and just how much content they've essentially been able to stuff it with. These remasters, these games that have been ported from older systems. Again, a lot of it I haven't been able to play until kind of this generation. I very much kind of fit into that demographic who I personally, I am not someone who is multi-console at this point. I just, I've already explained, and I've explained a lot about, why I kind of choose to have one system at a time, just due to, obviously the cost and of everything, but also just, the amount of time that I have in in my day. I'm not able to just kind of play through everything. And just having one, console focus at a time just is a lot easier to manage, and it helps in me being able to enjoy the games that I do have. But I do very much kind of fit into that demographic of wanting to play older games that weren't available before. And so all of these things, all of these factors taken into account, it leads me to and actually, pretty satisfied customer for the most part. I think again, there's still so many games that I have yet to play through, that are kind of on my list of games that I want to get or that I already have, and I just haven't had the chance to play through yet. So I'm really, I think this just sort of really ties the knot, this announcement. Not only was it like a really nice surprise to see kind of coming back into, coming back home and everything, but I am just sort of, I think it just kind of leaves me satisfied for the time being before getting into the next console and the next sort of cycle of things, and being a part of like that next hype train, because really this was kind of like the big thing, right? I talked about this maybe a couple weeks ago, talking about kind of what remaining games I would like to see potentially remastered, ported over to the Switch. And I think X was one of them. Obviously, I mentioned like Xenosaga, Xenogears, and that kind of thing. But X kind of makes the most sense out of all of the Xeno games, considering the Monolith Soft connection and Nintendo ownership and all of these things. But I think there's just a lot of we've had a lot of really nice string of news with Monolith Soft recently, including kind of the announcement, the 25th anniversary announcement, and then also, their announcement that they're working on a new game and sort of their desire to hire more people and expand their team. And then finally, kind of to cap it off at the end of October, this announcement for X. So it's been a really nice kind of string of news. Considering kind of the state of the industry too, I I don't know if it's like directly related necessarily, because if you look at something, in the AAA space, whether it's like Sony affiliated companies or Microsoft affiliated companies, you see just like all of these like shutdowns and all of these personnel being laid off because their games don't sell to the craziest degree that they do expect. It's really nice to see one of my favorite developers, who created one of my favorite franchises, be successful despite not having the craziest amount of sales, but also being able to sort of continue off of that, continue to generate hype and build momentum, and just have this establish a niche kind of fan base and franchise, that I feel like has the potential to kind of to sustain growth in all of these things, and continue to grow leading into the next console cycle, and not have to suffer setbacks because they didn't meet certain sales and profit expectations. You know what I mean? I think it's really, I don't know, it's really nice to see that, and I hope that other companies are able to kind of maybe look at that and see that, hey, not every single successful game series has to be in like the tens of millions of sales numbers and fail to meet expectations. It's kind of like what Square Enix does. It's really frustrating to kind of see their sort of projections. I know they're a much bigger company than Monolith Soft, and they have a lot larger budgets, but it just like I feel like if you are selling millions of copies, you should be at least above the profit margin, not at a zero. Like it's just I hate seeing that, because like I know how much developers and how much programmers and people within those companies, how much they put into these games, and only for them to not reach a certain target level, and then to default for all of them to get laid off and not be able to like celebrate the success of the work that they put out, is just like, it's disheartening. It sucks. I hate it. It's such like an unfortunate byproduct of the way in which essentially executives command these companies, and how much of a sway the quote unquote profit profit projections have on, and profit expectations have on company performance. It just sucks, because there's so I feel like these things can be so better managed in a lot of ways. It's not always going to be about obviously I think there are instances where you do need to sell a certain amount to be considered successful and to be able to grow and whatnot. But to just expect the world out of something is just not the way. It just doesn't feel like the way to go, and it's not sustainable. And I want to see across the board companies succeed, because I know there's a lot of good games out there, and a lot of good stuff that's being created. It's just unfortunate that essentially the kind of the anchor is weighed heavily on just the employees, and not the people, not the personnel at the top. But anyways, regardless of all that, I'm really happy to just kind of see this success from Monolith Soft, and then just on top of that, you get this announcement for X, which we've been waiting for a very, very long time, to almost 10 years now. So it's really great to see, and I'm really excited to finally be able to get my hands on the game next year and play that. That will definitely be a day one purchase for me. Let's get back into some basketball stuff. So the Warriors, so far they've played 3 games. It's earlier on in the season, so I'm able to kind of do a bit more of a thorough look at at some of the results of these games. Like as we kind of continue on, I'm probably not going to be as honed in. I'm probably like when it's like game like 50, like 6, I'm probably gonna be like, all right, they lost one to, a good team, they got a good win. But like, because it's so early, again, small sample size, we're able to kind of dissect things a little better. They won their first game against the Trailblazers in a pretty handedly fashion. I'm not super surprised there because the Blazers are tanking, and they're in development rebuild mode. And then they also won against the Jazz, I believe, as their second game. So they've taken care of business for against some of the worst teams, bad teams in the league. And then they lost against the Clippers, and I think that's probably like the best measurement tool or measuring kind of outlook, I would say, in comparison to maybe teams like the Jazz or the Blazers, because I think the Clippers are sort of in the same range as the Warriors. Like I mentioned last time that I recorded, I think the Warriors do fall kind of in that sort of play-in lower playoff bracket range with teams like the Clippers or maybe the Suns or the Lakers, although the Lakers have looked pretty good so far. And the Kings, like just all of essentially the entire Pacific Division are all kind of like battling with each other, which is pretty crazy. But I think that the loss, I wasn't really able to watch like a ton of the Clippers game, but this game later tonight against the Pelicans, I think, is going to give us a sense of how well we're able to kind of compete against teams within kind of that range. Not like the top contending teams in the West, whether it's like the Thunder, the Timberwolves. I don't know if I can put the Nuggets right now because they don't look that great. But, just the or I guess the Mavericks, like the top teams in the West. Like, I don't know how well, that's going to obviously be quite a battle against those teams. But other teams that are all kind of in sort of playoff contention mix, I think it will give us like a good sense of how well we match up against them. I think with the Pelicans in particular, I think we actually do match up decently against them. I don't know if we have really an answer for Zion if he is going to play, but they kind of lack a center because they lost Valanciunas. So they have, I think, Daniel Tice as sort of their starting center at this point. So I think in terms of kind of the small ball mentality, that sort of works well for us. But I do think there are some maybe size disadvantages that you could see, especially if we go with like a 3-4 guard lineup, as Steve Kerr likes to do. But I do think if they're able to sort of sustain the level of shooting that they have in the last few games, especially with their 3-point shooting, Buddy Hield has been really good so far for us. I hope that his performance kind of continues because he's been really a nice highlight for us, as well as some of the other kind of wing players on our team. We have a lot of options. Curry's out today. We'll see how well we can match up against them without Steph. I'm intrigued. I'm interested in seeing how it goes. I think the Pelicans are missing players. They're also missing CJ McCollum, and then I think also Trey Murphy. Is he still out? So they're kind of low on players as well. So I do think that tonight's going to be pretty evenly matched, and I think it should kind of give us a good indication of how well we sort of stack up along kind of like the other teams that are similar to the Warriors. So it'll be interesting. I'll definitely be tuning in, and I'm excited to kind of see, how well the supporting cast is going to do outside of Steph. Wiggins has kind of had a nice little bounce back so far. Nothing crazy, but he's been really consistent so far. There's definitely, it seems like, just based on what I've seen, at least from like the first couple of games that I've been able to catch, just like the highlights and everything, he does seem to have a bit more of like a bounce in his step, which is really nice to see. I'm not putting like a ton of weight on his performance and his ability to uplift this team, but if he's even able to get to kind of that, it was sort of like a meme during their championship run, but when he was kind of like the 17 point, 17 point performance player alongside some good defense, just being like a good above average player, I think gave the Warriors a good lift and actually put them to be, a pretty good team. And so if we're able to get that from him, I just think it would be really nice, just sort of moving forward. So I'm cautiously optimistic. We have sort of like an easy stretch so far in kind of this beginning of the season. I think it would be good to kind of take advantage of that and try to get out in front. We did have a good, we did start off really well last year. I think we were like 10-1 or something like that. And then obviously it kind of, dipped down and kind of up. There was just a lot of ups and downs last year. I have a feeling it might be something similar this year as well, but I do think we have the personnel and the depth to where we will be in at least in a good spot against some of the more tougher teams in the West. So I cautiously optimistic, not anything high, no, never too high, never too low, especially just kind of this season. I think last year there were definitely moments where I was, I think I was maybe a little more upset than I should have been. But to be fair, they did blow just like a ton of double-digit 20-point leads. So I think I felt a little justified in being more upset than I usually was. I think that if they're able to just be within striking distance with some of the better teams in the league, I'll be very happy. And so, yeah, I like what I've seen so far. I hope that we can at least continue some of that trajectory, at least kind of the shooting portion of it, because that looks good. Maybe this will be a surprise season. You never know. You don't want to write off. You don't want to write off Steph or anything like that. So, but yeah, I just wanted to kind of do a quick update on some basketball stuff. We got kind of a week ahead. Unfortunately, yeah, it seems like there's not going to be any Switch 2 announcement this month. So apologies to everyone who was on the October train, October team, September team. Sorry to say, it's probably going to be next year. I think that's most likely going to be the next time that we actually do see something in action. But I'm very happy for myself and my fellow Xenoblade fans that we finally got X on the Switch, and we'll be excited to play that very soon. That's going to do it for now. I'm probably going to catch up later this weekend, do another quick recap of some of the games that caught my attention, some teams that I have been enjoying watching outside of my own, along with other stuff that came up that I want to talk about. So yeah, I'll leave it off at that for now. All right, recording this on November 2nd. It is a Saturday. Crazy that we're already in November. Only 2 months left in the year. Every time we come to this at least like in the last few years or so, once I've kind of become more or less more of an adult, it has sort of crept up on me, this sort of last holiday period of the year. And it's interesting. I go through phases, I think, where I am feeling a little more joyous and a little more just kind of like uplifted. I think last year was an interesting time. It was kind of like a sense of like melancholy in some ways. I think as a kid, you definitely tend to, at least for me personally, I tended to really look at this kind of holiday period as like a time of yay, like, Christmas and all that kind of stuff, and really be sort of in that quote unquote spirit, if you want to call it that. I don't know if it's, I don't know if I want to call it cynicism, because I don't think that's necessarily true. But yeah, it's just like a different feeling now, as I just grow older, in terms of how I feel about kind of the holidays, right? I do very much understand when people do struggle during this period of time. One, it's the weather, and a lot of other places just outside of my own, you're dealing with just harsher weather and temperatures, and it's just colder and darker and that kind of thing. So that I'm sure that significantly impacts people's moods and just general well-being. And then just on top of that, you do have kind of this contrast between people who do really look at kind of this period as like a celebratory kind of thing, and others who maybe they want to like distance themselves from it. And I don't know, it's just and especially if you are someone who is like, I don't know, you're just like distant from family or whatever. I really do sympathize and empathize with that. I have sort of not moved away from the holiday celebration by any means, but I do look at it from the lens of someone who, isn't just kind of like, I don't know, I just try not to treat it like it is the period for consumption, like how like how our sort of country, sort of looks at it from a very commercial perspective, and trying to market things for Black Friday and kind of leading into the holidays. I mean, I talk about this almost every year since I've done this, sort of the just the insane kind of immediate sort of backlash or like whiplash you get going from Thanksgiving to to Black Friday, right? And I mean, you can talk about Thanksgiving itself, the the actual, history behind it and everything, and how that's sort of changed up until this point. I think more recently we've sort of had a bit more of a reckoning with it in terms of just the the actual history relating to Native Americans and relating to indigenous people, not only within the states but within kind of the North and South American kind of continents, just like the devastating history that has occurred, and just sort of thinking about that a little bit more, instead of like it being just sort of this like imaginary vision of what peace looks like between two different people, when in reality that was not really close to what it was. And just kind of thinking about that, like people moving away from celebrating Thanksgiving, treating it in a different way, instead of thinking it of through the lens of this sort of almost kind of fictitious vision of what the holiday is, like you just sort of like repurpose it to something else. I think that's something as well, or just treating it as looking at it similar to something like Columbus Day, and changing it to just sort of like a sort of like a learning period in a way. I don't know. There's a lot of things to kind of look at it. But I think especially nowadays we just sort of have myself. I look at it from a very different lens than when I did as a kid. I do think it's really funny. I'm curious as to how schools nowadays treat Thanksgiving and how we sort of approach it. Because when I was a kid, sort of the common thing to do was sort of like the fall feel of things. We used to do like, hand turkeys and stuff like that, where we drew, a turkey using our hand and that sort of thing. And I don't know, just those little kind of celebrations we did in school. I don't know how much water that holds nowadays. I'm sure schools still do that in a lot of places, but I'm curious because of just how I feel it's much more widely known, just with the access to information, that Thanksgiving is really not what it is, what it was perceived to be, or what it was sort of established to be beforehand. Kids know, man. Kids are exposed to a lot of stuff, for better or for worse. One of the things is just having more information at their fingertips. So I feel younger children are probably a lot more, aware of these kinds of things, and I'm sure that they're gonna tend to be a lot more critical of these sort of things. You know what I mean? I think, there's sort of like, I do see, and I'm not someone who like interacts with kids, because I'm not like a teacher, and I don't have any like much younger siblings or family or anything like that. So I'm sort of taking this with like a kind of a grain of salt, and also from maybe a bit of a much more of kind of a perspective that I'm not as close to. But I have seen sort of kind of this like discussion around how kids are just less, or just not as like, intelligent, and they're kind of like stupid. And, you see like the sort of like the Gen, like quote unquote, like Gen Alpha speak of, where they say just like a bunch of random stuff that, that just doesn't really mean anything. I do think that has maybe been a bit overblown. Because kids, I feel like kids of every generation say stupid stuff all the time, and it just sort of is like a product of its time and everything like that. Sure, maybe some of that is a bit more exacerbated because of the effects of, being more online and that kind of thing, and just being constantly connected. And I'm sure that is like an issue that we will probably have to deal with later down the line, as these kids do develop and maybe have some issues that we'll probably have to, come to terms with. But I do think that kids are probably more intelligent than they are sort of given. Kids are not like smart, they're still developing, but they do retain a ton of information. And I think some of that information is related to just like stupid stuff, like, I don't know, like a skibbity toilet or whatever, just nonsense, like content. But I think part of it, they also retain some of the more serious stuff that they've dealt with, whether it is like something like a COVID, event, or, some other, like, I don't know, some other just awful traumatic event that they've experienced personally, or they've experienced through online, right? And I feel like they retain that kind of thing. And I think that because of these things, there has to maybe be a bit more of a concerted effort to make sure that what we are teaching them sticks. And while it's good to be critical of a lot of things, it's also good to have a healthy outlook on building like a better, future and that kind of thing. I do think that we are sort of embedded with a lot of cynicism. And I understand that there are so many things to really be just sort of shameful about, in terms of just being, just being a person living in this world, and just looking at the worldwide events that happen on a daily basis, and just thinking of like the human atrocities and all those things. But I do feel that, there has to be some type of optimism to leverage that out and to level the playing field, as opposed to just being constantly just constantly bombarded with just like news. If you're on Twitter, it's I'm not on Twitter at all, but just being constantly bombarded with with certain attitudes, and this is something that has always like stuck out to me in terms of like engagement on those types of sites. It's like the like the negative posts and the negative threads are the ones that result in more engagement, which result in people staying on the site and being mad. And it's like you just have to take a step away if there is something that you want to do about it. Like, just like do it without coming from a place where you are consumed by anger. I know there's a lot of things to be angry about. I totally get that. I feel that way sometimes. I do feel sometimes when I do see certain things, I just get like, just consumed by it and just angry, and I feel like I'm not able to do anything. But like, I feel like you need to kind of channel that in a certain way, do something at least like slightly, do something slightly positive, instead of just being stuck in this kind of perpetual loop of like, doom scrolling and all that. So I don't know. I don't really have like a overarching thing I can really say about that. I know this started off by talking about Thanksgiving and learning about, doing hand turkeys in school and shit like that. But like, I do feel that, I don't know. I like, with some level of having knowledge and having, an understanding of the history of the U.S. history and that kind of thing, I do think comes with like a certain level of skepticism and criticism and that kind of thing. And I think that kind of wears us down quite a lot. I'm not saying ignorance is necessarily bliss. I do think it is in a lot of instances, but you gotta just like, there's gotta be a certain way to approach it without feeling like it's like the end of the world. You know what I mean? I think a lot of things have happened beforehand and before our time that is really bad, but I do think that there has been a lot's been done to get to where we are currently, just overall. So I get it. It's bad. It's not great, like in a lot of instances, including just sort of the way in which we look at something like a Thanksgiving, right? And just sort of like, it's sort of like, it sucks. It sucks looking at that, but there's a way to try to, I don't know, turn it around in a way. Not to diminish what happened before, but to try to build on something and try to build something different. I don't know what my point is. I just think I don't want to be stuck in kind of this, like, I don't want to be stuck in kind of the headspace where it's like, all these things happen. Like, it's true. It is 100% true that all of these things happened. But you just can't get bogged down by the history of what did happen. You gotta try to, go forward from that, in a way, but like still have that in mind, but, build off of it somehow. I don't know what my point was. Thanksgiving, it's coming up. It's in a month. And then you also got Black Friday, cool. And then you got Christmas. You got Christmas decorations already being sold in grocery stores, cool. So yeah, it's that time of the year, and with that kind of comes with certain reflections and thinking about a lot of stuff. And yeah, maybe this is like the best time of the year for some people, but it's also sometimes the worst time of the year. So I think all of those feelings are valid. I myself, speaking of consumption, I've been watching quite a bit of basketball. It's been nice kind of catching up with that. This whole week really has been just like, after work and stuff, I've just been, watching basketball, just keeping track of things. And I've actually had some really good. There's been some really kind of nice highlights that have sort of popped up for me. Both like individual like game days and also some specific games themselves that have kind of come to mind. And yeah, I wanted to talk about that. I do think that like for like the regular season, this is sort of a conversation that I feel like is probably going to be ongoing throughout the year, but really treating the regular season with the kind of the respect it deserves, right? I know a lot of people, I think there's been sort of this conversation about how the regular season doesn't matter. Playoff accolades are all that really matter in the end. Championships are kind of the only thing that really matter at the end. And yeah, sure, like winning one is really important. It's important for the franchise. It's important for like player legacy, if you want to argue that. But I do think it is good to like take maybe like individual performances. Like maybe you have someone going for like 30 who's never going to go for 30 again. I think it's fun to look at that and just sort of like, I don't know, celebrate it in a way, even if it's like not super important in the grand scheme of things. It's also fun to like kind of like I mentioned this earlier this week, just like kind of like overreact to certain trends that are happening. And I don't know, it's like, especially now because of just like such a small sample size, we really can't draw too many conclusions at this point. Like some struggling teams might turn it around later in the year. And some of the teams that have sort of maybe over succeeded will potentially, suffer and be a worse team later down in the season. So I do think it's all just kind of like it's also kind of like a prisoner of the moment sort of thing. But it's fun. It's fun to sort of, look at that. So some things that kind of popped up this week and sort of stood out to me on Wednesday, I believe it was either Wednesday or Thursday, was a really good game or really good day for games. There were some like upsets, like the Pacers beat the Celtics. Like it was sort of like Pacers almost blew it. They went into overtime. I didn't really catch the full game, but I did see some of like the theatrics from Jason Tatum, and that was kind of fun to watch. Not a Celtics fan by any means, but it's cool to see, good players kind of take off. And you saw kind of just like weird results. Like I watched I watched like a significant amount of this Orlando Magic and Chicago Bulls game. I know it's a weird game to like, fixate on, but I'm fascinated. I'm fascinated by teams like the Bulls. I've talked about this in length before the season started. Like I'm just like fascinated by them because like it feels like they don't really have a sense of direction and all that. But they've managed to like sort of be on Thursday they went above. I think it was Thursday. They beat the Magic. Paolo Banchero had like he hit like a game-winning three, but he couldn't, he couldn't do it it was like 0.1 seconds, so it didn't count. Like the ball was still in his hand when the shot went up and, shot clock went off. So, but it was sort of like a weird game. Like the last quarter, the fourth quarter, like both teams were just like terrible. Like nobody was making a shot. Like it was it was kind of a disaster, sequence for both of those teams, but it ended up being close at the end and pretty fun. The Bulls are just such a weird team. So they went against the Magic, and then they went into Brooklyn yesterday, and they lose to them. The Nets are also an interesting team right now. I feel they're probably overachieving a little bit. They're also at 500 right now. The expectation is that they'll probably fall off once they sort of eventually trade away kind of their vet players like a Dennis Schroeder or a Cam Johnson. and then fully kind of go into the tank and allow their younger players to develop and have Cam Thomas score like 40 points a game. Right now he is averaging around 30 points, which is pretty crazy. But again, it is sort of maybe a symptom of the early season and kind of this excitement of having a new coach and kind of a new direction, really moving away from the era of a KD, Kyrie, sort of Harden, of sort of that super team, the attempt at a super team that didn't really work out. Moving away from that and really kind of trying to set up a new culture under Jordi Fernandez is cool. It's exciting. I think that's I feel as a franchise, that's a really good place to be, where you do have a lot of optimism for the future, the potential for there to be this great young talent in a Cooper Flag or Ace Bailey or whoever gets drafted to their team. I think there's a lot of excitement that comes from that, and you get kind of that optimism paired with this kind of early season success, which likely is not going to sustain over time. And you got fans engaged. You got me engaged, who's not even a fan, but it's fun watching this team. The game they had yesterday against the Bulls was a lot of fun. They had some really nice sequences where they were just making shots and moving the ball. Like Ben Simmons was like playing okay in like the first quarter. That was kind of interesting to see. I don't know if he's going to be, he's probably going to be stuck on that team because I don't think any team really wants him, unless, I don't know, some team just kind of makes like a head scratching decision and decides to trade for him for some reason. But yeah, it's just sort of this kind of early season kind of feeling where you have certain teams that kind of overachieve in certain ways, and you can get a sense of the direction they're going for. And I think that's exciting to see as a neutral fan. And I'm sure if you are a fan of some of these franchises, like the Nets, another team I think that comes to mind that are sort of being a little bit more, that are sort of, building or just trying to, find some kind of footing, is the Rockets. I think the Rockets have a bit more momentum going for them because they did have some actual success last year. And it seems like they're ready to kind of take the next leap, into kind of maybe a bit more of a playoff contending position. So there's certain teams that have been able to kind of get to a good spot, and it has kind of their fan bases excited and that sort of thing. One of the teams that I am sort of disappointed in, which is really silly, is the Hawks. I watched some of their preseason stuff, and I thought they were just a lot of fun to watch, but unfortunately a ton of their rotational players have gotten injured, so including just like Bogdanovich and Hunter and those kinds of things. So it's been a bit tough for them. So they've been sort of I don't expect them to be a good team, but I wanted them to be a bit more of a fun team. And it just hasn't really lived up to that. Their rookie Risa Shea has not looked very good either. So hoping he's able to turn it around, because right now the kind of the rookie class is looking a bit rough. It's unfortunate that the sort of the draft prospects and just kind of the analysts talking about this draft being kind of the weakest class is sort of living up to that. I'm hoping that some players can maybe curb that and sort of exceed expectations and really step out, because I don't know. I want experts to be proven wrong. I think it's sort of fun to sort of be enjoying these kinds of things in spite of them. And so I'm hoping for a level of success for this rookie class. A younger team that is sort of in line with maybe, being a little better than expected, is the Washington Wizards. They've gotten a couple of wins. They're probably not going to be good either, alongside the Nets, but they've been really fun to watch. I watched them play the Hawks, and there was just a lot of really fun sequences they had where they were like swinging the ball, and there was a ton of ball movement. Bilal Coulibaly was awesome to watch in that game. So was Bub Carrington, who's one of the rookies. They just had some really nice moments. It was nice to see Jordan Poole have some good spots during that game. So it was just sort of it was nice to kind of see that, because I'm sure as a Wizards fan, knowing that this year is kind of is a full-on development / tanking year can be a bit dissuading, because you are kind of like waiting for the next leap. But I do think they have a lot of these younger pieces, and if they are sort of able to develop them, and if they are able to get someone like a Cooper Flag, I think that they'll be pretty well set up. They just have some really nice younger players, and as in Coulibaly, which he looked really good in that one game against the Hawks. So hopefully I'm hoping for some, maybe some surprise wins for them. They'll still be bad, like I said, but I do think that they will be a potentially fun watch if they're able to kind of replicate that level of play from that Hawks game. Obviously, they were playing another team that was really banged up and not looking too good, but I think that there is a lot to draw on, and really kind of maybe something to look forward to for Wizards fans, and maybe in kind of neutral fans like myself. Let's touch on the Warriors a little bit. They have a game later today, I believe, against who are they playing today? Let me look it up, actually. Today they are playing, I can't look it up because I don't have data, but they're playing later today, and they've had a nice start. What I've said earlier this week, I think still holds in terms of just the kind of the depth that they do have, especially on the wing. Their defense is one of the best in the league, which is awesome to see. I love to see that. That I think is something to kind of something that you can kind of hold on to and hopefully build on going into the rest of the season. Of course, it is very early, but the way they were able to hold New Orleans, they won both games in Chase Center against them. The way they were able to kind of hold New Orleans to under 100 or even like 90 points, I thought was really impressive. Draymond's performance against Zion in the second game was awesome. He looked great. He had kind of flashes of his prime self. I feel that it's that could really be sort of the new identity of this team, instead of kind of solely relying on Curry to kind of carry them over the edge. We have the tools, we have the players now that can defend on the perimeter. The interior defense is a little questionable still, obviously, because of the size. If we do, we might have a bit of a size disadvantage against some of the larger teams. I think we were able to be successful because we matched up well against New Orleans. They don't really have a true center at this point. And I think that could be sort of what this team is for this season, is to really prioritize the defense and, the 3-point shooting. If you want to kind of be sort of like a Celtics light in this era, I think that could be really something. And we're doing it without Curry as well. So once we do get more difficult opponents, we'll see how well we'll see how well they stack up against them, but I think it's something to be optimistic about, at least for this season. Is that we do have the personnel to play some really good individual and team defense. Buddy Hield's been playing good defense too, so it looks like he's kind of encouraged. I know that just based on kind of the history of his play, that it's possible that he might have some stinkers and some games where he just makes no points, and I totally get that, and I do expect that. I hope that fans will not be super reactionary and wanting to get him off the team, because he has proven to be a really nice kind of secondary scorer. But he looks encouraged, like he's hustling, he's making good plays, and I think a lot of the other players have sort of followed suit in that. So I've liked what I've seen so far. It's really nice. It's good to just get some really encouraging wins, even if it's with maybe a team who is banged up in the Pelicans. And yeah, the hope is just that it will kind of continue, and at least that level of intensity in terms of the defensive side of the ball can be kind of carried over into other games and with opponents who are a little better. Some other things that kind of popped up to me. I talked about the Thursday, game slot. There was just like a ton of games that went down to the wire, and that was it was fun to watch. It was fun to kind of go back and forth between just sort of, switching back and forth between the games and seeing, how well certain teams were holding up. Yesterday, there were like a decent amount of, kind of blowouts and sort of games that got a little out of hand. I started watching the Pistons and the Knicks game, and before I knew it, it was like a 20-point lead in the first quarter. I was a little disappointed in that because I wanted there to be a bit more competition with the Pistons. I know the Pistons have sort of a bit more, maybe a bit more hope riding into this season with a coaching staff change and everything. So you want a little bit more from that, and I feel bad for Detroit fans. I think the Knicks just kind of hit off they just kind of hit it off, like they found some kind of groove. I mean, they are going into this season with the Cat trade, with the Bridges trade. I think that there are a lot of kind of championship expectations for this team, and they definitely looked that part, at least from what I saw in that game. And I think they just sort of all clicked, and it just sort of was a bad timing for the Pistons, unfortunately. So hopefully it doesn't, hopefully they don't go on like another 20 plus game losing streak. I really want them to be better than that. I don't want teams to be so bad that their fans are kind of giving up on them. If they are bad, you want there to be some kind of direction, kind of like the Nets and the Wizards, and I guess like you could say the Trailblazers as well, right? Teams that are clearly trying to develop their younger talent and also acquire newer talent through the draft. Like that's like a clear direction to go for. And maybe you could argue that the Pistons are sort of like in a similar line, but they've been so bad for such a long time that I feel like you want them to be at least a little better than they have been in the last, especially last year. As a neutral fan, I just don't like to see that kind of thing. I just dislike when fans have to be kind of subjugated to just like really poor team management and team building. Like, it just sucks to see, man. Like, and then you got fans that are just kind of disengaged and don't want to watch their team. Like, I want, like, maybe even if it is for like a team that I don't particularly care for, I want to see them reach some level of competition. I do like to see kind of like an underdog sort of story. I'm sure a lot of people do. And I just it's too bad. Hopefully this will be kind of a blip for them, and they're able to move on and just like get to a different spot and have better success this season. But yeah, the game that stood out to me the most yesterday, because I always kind of doing my thing where I was flipping through, was the kind of the last game, or one of the last games of the night, which was the Timberwolves and the Nuggets. I watched primarily the second half, and it was such like a wild kind of almost back and forth, where the Wolves had like I think the most they had was a 16-point lead, and Denver came back, and they took the lead, and they built up that lead to like 10, with like 4 minutes remaining, and I felt pretty confident that Denver was going to be able to hold on to that, because just like I feel like Jokic just doesn't bitch. He doesn't miss in the last, in the clutch, in the last like 2-3 minutes of a game. So I was almost kind of writing off Minnesota, but they also came back with the play from Nikhil Alexander Walker. He had some huge shots and some nice like defensive moments, and that kind of helped propel them to a win. It was a weird game. It was just like this, like, Minnesota had a pretty large lead, and Denver came back, and then they had like a decent lead, and then they kind of blew that, and then they ended up losing. So it was sort of this like back and forth. It was a very interesting game. I feel it was one of those games where I was just like, I don't, I was like, okay, I guess Minnesota might have this. Oh no, Denver for sure has this. Oh, I guess Minnesota has this. Just this sort of back and forth between those two teams is pretty interesting. There's also this sort of a little bit of a rivalry kind of brewing, especially after last playoffs 7-game series where Denver blew a 20-point lead, and then Minnesota won in Game 7. So you have kind of this a little tension going back and forth. There was that moment where Christian Brown had a poster dunk on Rudy Gobert, and he was getting pretty hyped up about that, and Gobert kind of took offense to that. So there's a little bit, there's kind of chippiness going between them, which we like to see. Because I'm kind of struggling to think right now, especially there's not really, I don't know, there's not really any rivalries right now. It doesn't feel like there's not really any two teams that dislike each other, or two fan bases that dislike each other. I can't really think of any right now outside of those two teams. Those two teams also happen to be in the same division as well, so I think that kind of helps stoke kind of the flames of that. But it'll be fun to kind of see those two teams continue to kind of face off against each other, potentially in the playoffs as well, if Denver is able to get on track, which I think they will. I think they're just kind of struggling right now. But yeah, it's they're really the only rivalry that I kind of am seeing right now. I'm trying to think. Is there anything on the Eastern Conference? I guess maybe the Knicks and the Sixers. Maybe just the Sixers are kind of. I mean, they don't have Embiid or Paul George, so they're looking pretty bad. So maybe once they get those guys back, they could kind of, build something up again. Because I know New York fans hate Embiid now, which I don't really blame them. He had some dirty plays in their series, but it's been a good week of basketball. Really, I that's really kind of the main takeaway. There's been some really nice games. There's been really some fun moments, and it's good to be kind of in this period, this sort of early season period before kind of the dog days of leading into like the All-Star break. So I think maybe the NBA Cup stuff is like coming up too. Now there's an official name, the Emirates Cup. I'm interested in seeing how that kind of what the changes are going to look like for this year, and how much excitement it's going to kind of brew up. If there is going to be a bit more fanfare involved, because I do remember when when it went to Vegas, you had like the Lakers play against the the Pacers, right, for the championship cup, and it was fun to watch, but it just like I think LA got like a little banner in crypto.com arena. They got a little NBA Cup banner. I'm curious what if that's going to be enough, plus kind of the additional compensation they receive, if that's going to be enough to kind of entice players to be more motivated, if that's something, but it's fun. Like, even if it is just kind of like another, even if it is sort of another coat of paint that you're adding on the NBA core or the jerseys or whatever, just a little flavor, a little more just kind of energy injected, and I think could incentivize players to just play better, and it could just result, because there were some really fun games last year from what I remember. I remember it was the Pacers and the Celtics. That game was a lot of fun. I know that was kind of like almost the coming out party for Tyrese Halliburton. He's not playing that well right now, but he that was sort of like a nice moment for the Pacers, and then also just for him as well. So maybe we get something like that this year as well. Maybe there's like another team that's like, ooh, you didn't really expect them to kind of pop out. So we'll see how it goes. Just a lot of basketball stuff. I've on a separate note, I've been kind of slowly but surely making my way through Echoes of Wisdom, just kind of enjoying my time with it. Dragon Quest III, the HD 2D remake, is coming out in a couple of weeks. So that's right around the corner. It is crazy how quickly like we've gotten to that point. I will absolutely be playing that. So I think I'm assuming that I'll probably have Echoes of Wisdom wrapped up by then. I'm kind of, as I said, I'm making my way through. So I think by the time it comes out within the next couple of weeks, I'll be finished, and it'll be the perfect kind of segue to get into Dragon Quest. I'm so ready. I've been I haven't played 3. I've played 1 on iPhone, and I think if the next year when the HD 2D remakes come out for 1 and 2, I'll probably pick it up. I'll most likely maybe just dive right into 2, but it's been a while since I've really played Dragon Quest. The last was, I think, 11, right? And I absolutely loved 11. I think it's probably one of my favorite games, and I'm just really looking forward to some old school and maybe a little bit of new quality of life update added to kind of this old school JRPG. I'm just really looking forward to it. Just hearing the music is getting me excited as well. So a lot to look forward to. That's coming up real soon. So I'll obviously be talking about that once that comes out. But yeah, that's all I got for now and for this week's episode. Thanks for listening. As always, this has been Save the Semantics, signing off.